Sport. One word that can bring millions together. Sport is a religion to many, and athletes devote their life to mastery. Every sport is so different. Different rules, different techniques, different equipment, and different arenas. However,
Klay Thompson has suffered a full tear of his right Achilles. He will miss the entire season.
Holding on to his knee. And
looks like 2021 is a wrap for the great Rafa Nadal.
Robert Lewandowski is going to be out for 4 weeks.
The pain is not allowing me to enjoy competing or training or any of the stuff that I love about tennis.
every sport is so different. However, injuries have remained a constant. So now the question everyone's asking. Why are these injuries occurring? And what can we do to prevent them?
Over the course of this documentary, we will be discussing injury prevention in two sports, tennis and basketball.
These two sports are collectively played by over 500 million people in the world today. As a result,
We will talk about the causes of injuries in these respective sports, as well as the injury prevention methods, while also presenting case studies to further support our claims.
tennis is one of the most popular sports in the world. The most common muscles used are the calves, hamstrings, and quadriceps are the most used lower body muscles. They are needed for movement around the court. Not only do the lower body muscles increase the speed of the player's movement, but also help generate more power on their ground strokes. In the upper body, the main muscles used are the arms, shoulders, upper back, abdominal muscles, and chest.
One of the most important aspects to understand when exploring injury prevention in tennis is to understand the tennis kinetic chain.
The kinetic chain in tennis is a succession of different movements of various joints and contraction of various muscles in an order that leads to the execution of a shot. The chain in tennis begins from the foot and ankle, then to the calves, quadriceps, and hamstrings. Then the hips. The power from the hips is then transferred to the arms, and then the legs are used to recover. In tennis, you could repeat this chain of processes hundreds of times over the course of just one match. Thus, if you have a weak link in a muscle group involved in this process, various muscles across your body will become very prone to injuries.
As any single weak link in the kinetic chain could harm us tremendously,
We must identify the movements that are putting strain on our muscles, common injuries related to those movements, and look for preventive measures to make sure that we do not possess a dramatically weaker muscle amongst our kinetic chain that could potentially put us in danger.
so let's start with the very beginning of the kinetic chain in tennis, with the foot and ankle.
Tennis involves an enormous amount of footwork, and as a result, a lot of load falls on the foot and ankle.
Due to the quick stop and starts in short distances, your body will become susceptible to injuries, oftentimes due to lack of strength in the required muscles.
Tennis players also have to play on a range of surfaces. Hard courts are usually harder on the ankle, as stops are very sudden, and thus the load of a stop is taken at once by the ankle and foot. I sat down with Anand sir to understand his perspectives on injuries in tennis, their causes, and how we can prevent them. He is a former top 3 player in the country and had a world ranking in men's singles. He is currently a professional coach with an abundance of experience at the highest level, and he currently coaches some of the best players in the country.
Ankle around your ankles, sometimes tissues, they tend to, take the load, especially in hard courts. When you're getting wrong foot and suddenly you want to stop and move, that's when the ankle takes the load. So that's where it happens. On a clay court, when you're trying to slide and suddenly your foot gets stuck, and the whole body weight is on that particular side of the ankle. So that's where maybe your tendons get torn there. So these can happen.
The common foot and ankle injuries associated with tennis players are Achilles tendonitis, Peroneal tendinitis, ankle sprains, and plantar fasciitis. The Achilles tendon is one of the most important yet vulnerable tendons for any athlete. The Achilles tendon is the tendon that attaches the calf muscle to the heel.
The Achilles is what is used
To push off your foot when accelerating and jumping.
As a result, the Achilles tendon is used in literally every movement in tennis.
A rupture to the Achilles tendon could force you to stay away from competition for many months together, due to how heavily used yet delicate the muscle is. So what causes Achilles tendonitis?
Achilles tendonitis is an overuse injury that occurs when you indulge in training that is beyond what your Achilles can handle. To prevent this from happening, you must understand your Achilles capacity and then strengthen it based on the training you are going to put yourself through. Some exercises to prevent Achilles tendonitis are as follows.
These exercises strengthen the calf, which is a surrounding muscle to the Achilles. By strengthening the calf, you are relieving load from the Achilles tendon, thus decreasing your chance of injury. Peroneal tendinitis is an injury that affects the peroneal tendons in the ankle area. These tendons can become inflamed due to minute tears in the tendon due to improper stopping or too much load on the muscle during a particular change of direction.
Well, what are some ways that we can prevent peroneal tendinitis?
These are two exercises that increase ankle mobility. With increased mobility, the ankle can take more pressure during strenuous movements. Ankle sprains are extremely common in tennis due to the sudden starts and stops and multiple change of directions in a small area. Movements such as backwards running and lateral jumping in tennis also give a lot of scope for ankle sprains to occur. There are numerous preventive methods for ankle sprains. These methods are all about increasing flexibility in the ankle. Some effective exercises include This injury originates at the bottom of the heel and slowly causes pain across the bottom of the foot in the tissue known as the plantar fascia.
This tissue connects the heel to all of the toes.
Tennis players are constantly on their feet and thus on their plantar fascia as well.
Constant pressure on this tissue results in chronic tension, which results in plantar fasciitis.
There is not much strengthening you can do for plantar fasciitis. Recovery mainly revolves around ice and rest, while prevention is all about stretching and releasing tightness or tension in the tissue using methods such as ball or foam rolling. The next step in the kinetic chain of tennis are the knees. There is a lot of strain put on the knee while playing tennis. This is due to the intense side-to-side movements involved in the sport.
There are mainly two knee-related injuries in tennis.
Jumper's knee, just like other tennis-related injuries, comes due to repetitive strain and overuse of the tendons surrounding it. The injury mainly affects the patellar tendon.
This tendon attaches the bottom of the kneecap to the top of the shin bone.
Due to the constant jumping as well as transfer of weight, it can cause degradation of the tendon. The term jumper's knee got its name after many basketball players were seen with the inflammation on the bottom of their knees from repetitive jumping. Tennis players jump while serving and also while hitting ground strokes. This jump is also on a hard surface most of the time. This makes tennis players increasingly prone to jumper's knee. There are various strengthening exercises you can do to minimize the load on the knee.
The most important muscles to strengthen to avoid knee injuries like jumper's knee are the quadriceps and hamstrings.
These are the surrounding muscles of the knee.
The primary function of the quadricep
Is to extend and strengthen the knee. The quadricep acts as a brace for the knee, while the hamstring helps with other important movements.
The more strength these muscles have, the less load that falls on the knee.
There are multiple exercises to effectively strengthen and increase flexibility in the quadricep. Many tennis players feel a pain at the front of their knee.
During and following a match.
The reason for this is patellofemoral pain. Patellofemoral pain comes as a result of overuse. The load is put on the knee during the bending phase. Tennis players bend for every shot they hit, and over the course of a match or a few training sessions, these add up.
The primary cause of patellofemoral pain are weak quadriceps and low hamstring flexibility.
If you have both of these conditions, then your patella starts to absorb a bulk of the load and thus causes irritation in the cartilage directly under the kneecap.
And consequently results in microtrauma in the patellofemoral tendon.
There are multiple strengthening and stretching exercises for the quadriceps and hamstrings that will help relieve load from the patellofemoral tendon. The next step in the tennis kinetic chain are the quadriceps and hamstrings. Quadricep strains are most commonly due to a sudden acute stretch of the muscle. These sudden forceful contractions of the quadricep muscles occur during knee bending and hip extension. In tennis, the sudden accelerations lead to extremely forceful contractions and overextension in the muscle, and at some point, if there is not enough strength in the quadricep to bear that force, strains and tears are bound to happen. There are a few exercises that tennis players can do to minimize their chance of quadricep strains. In tennis, a hamstring muscle strain is the most common injury to the thigh.
The thigh is made up of two muscles, the quadricep and hamstring.
The main cause of a hamstring strain is muscle overload.
This muscle overload occurs when the hamstring is stretched beyond its normal range,
or when there is a sudden load due to rapid deceleration or rapid acceleration.
During acceleration, the hamstring is loaded, and if the muscle is unable to bear this load, muscle fibers tear.
Hamstring is getting torn due to, pushing your limits basically. While playing, you overstretch sometimes. You're in the wrong position. That's when tears happen.
There are multiple exercises tennis players can indulge in to prevent hamstring strains. The sport of tennis is full of turning, pivoting, and change of directions. This puts a lot of stress on the hip. Eventually, if the player is not conditioning properly, these movements could lead to chronic pain in the hip. Turning the hip is extremely important in tennis, as that is how players generate power and momentum in their shots.
Rotation and uncoiling is one of the most important things in stroke production, backhand, forehand, and even in your serve. Once you've gone up and you've got to rotate those hips in order to get maximum torque out of your serve. So it's nice if you can be loose and strong. I mean, perfect examples of that are guys like Novak Djokovic, Grigor Dimitrov, even Rafael Nadal, so strong in his hips.
Stiffness in the hip and lack of strength is the major cause of developing hip injuries.
As a result of this, it is extremely important to increase hip mobility, flexibility, and strength.
The most common hip injuries found in tennis players are labral tears, hip flexor strains, sports hernia, and abductor strains.
These four injuries essentially have the same causes.
They are due to the repetitive rotational movements that tennis demands.
When the hip cannot support the extent of these movements,
There are several preventive exercises to increase flexibility and strength in the hip. The next step in the tennis kinetic chain is the core. The core is key in tennis as it provides stability for the body. The core connects the upper and lower limbs. The stronger your core is, the more stable you will be, and the more momentum you can generate, and as a result, your performance on the court will increase. The main core-related injuries in tennis are abdominal strains. These abdominal strains happen most commonly during the service motion. The elbow and shoulder are the next and final step of the kinetic chain in tennis.
Overuse can be for, let's say, for senior intermediate to advanced players who have good technique, but not enough, muscle around the elbow to support the joint. Muscles are basically there to support your joints, not to take the load. But if you don't have enough strength around in those muscles to support your joint, that's when your elbow joints or any joint will start feeling the load.
Tennis elbow is mostly caused by overusing your forearm due to repetitive arduous activity. This overuse causes injury to the muscles and tendon area around the outside of the elbow. The elbow takes a lot of force when hitting the ball if the wrong technique is being used. Higher level players with good techniques also get tennis elbow due to overuse.
tennis elbow, though, is most commonly seen in recreational players.
Improper technique and lack of strength in the tendons.
So, like younger kids, we see a lot of shoulder, elbow, and wrist because of how they are trying to hit the ball.
This injury occurs due to poor strengthening of the rotator cuff muscles. Due to the weakness of the muscle, the shoulder oftentimes feels excessive load, which irritates the tissue.
Some of these tissues in the shoulder are the tendon and bursa. Shoulder pain is very common in tennis players. Studies show that 25% of high-level players between the ages of 12 to 19 attain shoulder pain. 50% of middle-aged players do as well.
Another common cause of shoulder injuries, apart from poor strengthening of the rotator cuffs, is overuse.
A tennis player may serve 1,000 times in a single tournament. A serve is a motion that puts a load on the whole body, especially the shoulder. During a serve, the shoulder rotates almost 2,400 degrees per second.
The unbelievable rotation of the shoulder, coupled with the insane repetition of the serve,
results in shoulder injuries.
The rotator cuff attaches the bone in the upper arm to the shoulder blade.
Due to repetitive movement, imbalances are caused in the shoulder muscle.
These imbalances put unnecessary stress on the rotator cuff tendons.
And the rotator cuff tendons get impinged or damaged.
To prevent these imbalances from occurring, you must make sure that your shoulder is strengthened enough to endure the movements that you are partaking in.
There are a few exercises that players can do to prevent rotator cuff and shoulder related injuries.